Jene Wilton was one of those who came from Bailey County and Muleshoe with the Bailey County EMS to the Hurricane Harvey destitute people. Jene, when did you go?
I went down the night before the hurricane actually made landfall.
Oh, really? So you were right there when it hit?
Yes, ma'am. I was staged up in San Antonio, and as the hurricane came inland, we got our orders. As soon as the eye passed, they sent us into a small airport between Ingleside and Aransas Pass.
Oh, that was a devastating area.
Yes, ma'am. It was pretty torn up. It was bad.
And what did it look like when you got there, Jene?
About the only way I could describe it is if you have ever seen tornado damage. It was damaged like that, but as far as you could see for miles and miles. Just everything was just blown down. It was awful. It was terrible.
Now, in that area that you were in at first, had most of the people evacuated?
Yes, ma'am. Most of them had. There are always going to be a few who will just refuse to go. They want to stay behind and try to ride it out. And then there are those who have to stay, your first responders,
Sure.
Police officers, EMS, and they had fared pretty well, but the residents who tried to stay, they took it pretty rough.
Can't even imagine. Now, we had a lot of people go from here in Muleshoe. Do you live in Muleshoe?
Yes, ma'am, I do. I've been here about 2 years now.
Good. Glad to have you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be part of the community.
And you're a very important part of the community, too. Now, we had the Bailey County, not the Bailey County, the First Baptist Church sent a crew in after the the hurricane landed in Nome, Texas, and then we had several more men who came from your unit here after you came.
Yes, ma'am.
You were there right at the very first. Now, so what was your job to do?
I went with a mobile medical unit, part of the Texas Emergency Medical Task Force Team 1. And we went down with a mobile medical unit to set up. It's basically a field hospital. It's built out of tents. We haul everything in on trucks. It's fully self-sustained. We go in with MREs for us to eat, all the medical supplies we need, full medical teams to provide immediate emergency care.
And so how many people did you see in that?
We saw a little over 300 at the first place that we set up. We were there about a day and a half. We set up in the dark, still quite a bit of rain and wind, and we began seeing patients the next day. And I think our actual number was 351 patients that we treated in about a 3.5 day period.
And so then where did you move to?
After that, I moved back to San Antonio, and the mobile medical unit moved on to Orange, Texas, over on the Louisiana border. Sure.
Now, what would you say to someone who would want to do this mission?
Oh, gosh. It's very rewarding. It's heart-rending at the same time, but to be able to be there on people's worst day and to offer medical care, a prayer, some words of encouragement, a meal. It's very humbling and yet rewarding work.
And now, how were you taken care of? Like, where did you sleep and where did you eat?
First 3 days we were out, we slept in the front seat of our trucks. We were eating MREs. The meals ready to eat, and then once we got the hospital built up a little bit more, we set up a tent for us to live in. But first priority is those patients that need care. So
now, how many days, Jene, were you there?
2 days of travel and 6 actual days of setting up the unit and operating medical systems.
Have you ever done this before?
No, ma'am. This was my first time. I had trained with the Emergency Medical Task Force in preparation for this type event, and then that's why I got to go so quickly, is that I had done the training and was qualified to help set things up and run the medical unit.
Now, I know you work with the Bailey County EMS here in Muleshoe. Have you done this other places?
No, ma'am. This is my first place.
Really?
Yes, ma'am. I'm stationed out at Cannon Air Force Base. Live here in Muleshoe. This is something I've always wanted to do, and so I'm trying to set up a second career and hoping to someday be a paramedic here in Muleshoe.
Oh, well, how wonderful. Now, what were some of the things that you saw that really impressed you about the people?
Oh, gosh. You know, I've been all over the world in over 30 years of military service, and I can truly say that there is no place like home, and there is no place like Texas. One of the most encouraging things I saw down there were people who had lost virtually everything. Everything they had left, they were carrying. And yet they found the compassion and the love for neighbors and friends to look and see that they may have had less. And I actually saw people open their backpacks and take out the dry clothes they had to give to someone who had wet and muddy clothes. And it was all they had to give. So it's Texans taking care of Texans. And I believe that was probably the most encouraging thing that I've seen.
Oh, what a blessing for you.
Oh, absolutely. It gives you the strength. They're long, hard days. You're wet and nasty, but it gives you the strength and the courage to keep going and to find something else within yourself to give.
Now, were these people you were treating who had been injured in Hurricane Harvey?
Yes, ma'am. Initially, we had a lot of injuries from flying debris. Things had fallen on people.
Sure.
After a couple days go by, you begin to get the folks who are trying to get back into their homes and into their businesses, and they get injured that way.
Yes.
And then a couple days after that, you begin to see the people who are beginning to get sick from waiting around in the contaminated water and bad food and things like that. So it's a cascading effect in this type of an emergency.
Oh, goodness. We can't even imagine.
No, ma'am, not at all. We're very fortunate out here where we live. We've got our own weather challenges, but so far, thankfully, we hadn't had to deal with anything like that.
Absolutely. We are so very blessed. And now tell me something about if you could speak to someone else personally, and what would you tell them that you got out of this?
Oh, goodness. I believe that, I believe that the Lord has gifted each one of us in a special way, and I believe that those gifts keep coming throughout our lives. And so I don't think that he often gives us gifts for ourselves. I believe he gives us those things to give away. And so I would just encourage folks to look down deep within and look at their spiritual relationship and see what it is that the Lord has given you to give to someone else, and then find a place to give it.
Oh, what a wonderful message. That is wonderful, and bless you so very much for giving of your time and your energy and your spirit.
Well, thank you, ma'am. I'm honored to get to do this. I've got a chance to make a new beginning in my life, and I'm happy to be here in the community and to be able to give a little something back.
Well, we're so glad to have you in Muleshoe. Jene Wilton, who went to Hurricane Harvey right there at the very first of the tragedy that hit our Gulf Coast area. Two of the Bailey County EMS went down to the Gulf Coast just recently and are back here in Muleshoe to protect you. Kevin Baize and Kendall Giesbrecht. And Kevin, when did you all leave?
We left on August 31st, about 7 in the morning. And we went down to West Carlisle. We mustered up there with about 8 other ambulances from the area that went down together.
And now, Kendall, tell me, had you ever done anything like this before?
No, I hadn't. It was a great experience, and I enjoyed it very much.
Well, now, enjoyed it, really?
Yeah, it's fun to help people that are in need.
And they are certainly in need, aren't they, Kevin?
Yes, they are.
Now, where specifically did you all go?
First, when we left here, we went down to San Antonio was the main staging area at the AT&T Center, and we staged up there for that night. We got there that evening. We stayed there that night, and then the next morning, about mid-morning, we got our first mission.
And where was that mission?
That mission was to take patients back to Victoria from San Antonio. They had been Victoria Hospital had been evacuated because it was flooding, and so all those patients came up to San Antonio, New Braunfels, in that area.
Right.
And so we were just taking them back down there to the hospital that was reopening.
Now, you could take how many at a time?
Well, there was 5 ambulances in our strike team, and we kind of stayed together, and so we took 5 patients at a time, basically.
So, did you take one of these ambulances right behind us?
Well, we actually took the one in front of us, but yeah.
And so, in that ambulance, you could take one patient.
That's correct.
And so, what kind of injuries did they have?
What we saw was not very many injuries related to the hurricane. We dealt more with people with just their normal sickness, especially the ones that were being transported back that had been hospitalized for whatever reasons. So we didn't see very many injuries from the actual hurricane itself.
I see. Now, now did you just take one group of 5 at a time, or did you keep going back?
Well, the first day we just did one group of 5. The second day we teamed up with another strike team and an ambus, and I think that day in one trip we moved 23.
Now, what's an ambus?
An ambus is just like a big old bus. It's an ambulance. It hauls, is it 20 patients, I believe?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So did you always go back to Victoria?
Well, we were in San Antonio was our main staging area. So when we finished the mission, we'd go back to the staging area waiting for orders. We were there 4 days, and then we got deployed to Houston.
Oh, you went to Houston. So what did you do in Houston?
So when we got to Houston, they sent us to NRG Stadium, and that's where we staged. And as soon as we got there, we refueled, and within about 15 minutes, we had a mission, which was to go to the NRG, center, I guess, where they were housing a bunch of homeless that had been displaced by the flood.
Right.
There was, that first night, about 3,400 people in that place.
Oh, my.
And so what our job was to just be there in case there was an emergency. They had a kind of like a makeshift ER set up with doctors and nurses working there, and then any patient that needed to go to a hospital, that was our job to take that patient to the hospital.
And so how many did you take to a hospital?
That first night, I think we took 2 or 3 in a 12-hour shift. Just our ambulance, and then there was 5, so we took 15 total, or that's approximate. But
and so now, would you take them there in Houston?
That's right. The hospitals were all really close. I think the furthest hospital was 7 miles or something like that.
And so did you have any problem getting around with all the flooding and the water?
Not really with the flooding and the water. These country boys didn't really know their directions very good in downtown Houston, but we got along. A few wrong turns, but we got them where they needed to go.
So did you have any experience that you had never had before?
Can't think of anything just right off other than the whole experience altogether.
Right.
Driving Code 3 in downtown Houston is something we don't need to do again. It was an experience, but as far as patients, no. It was all pretty minor. I was impressed with their positive outlook.
The patients,
yes.
Really?
It seemed to me like they were not downcast by the situation. They were rather looking for ways to make things better.
Well, isn't that remarkable? I know that was easier on you.
Yes, it was.
And so now, Kendall, tell me, in your own words, what would you say to someone who had this mission to do again?
I would just tell them to go and enjoy every minute of it, and just help those folks out. They're very appreciative of us from West Texas coming that far down there. We got told over and over again how awesome it was that we gave of our time and came down there to help them out.
So now, we know you went first to San Antonio and then Victoria and ferrying them back and forth there, and then to Houston. Now, did you have another mission?
No, that was it. We pretty much stayed in Houston, and there was 2 shelters that we worked with in Houston. One at the NRG Center, and then one downtown in the George R. Brown Convention Center.
I see.
And those were the 2. It was pretty much the exact same. We worked 12-hour shifts, and then we were off for 12 hours.
And so where did you go to rest?
There at the NRG Center, they had I'm not even sure what it's called, a big room that they had just a bunch of cots set up for us in there.
Well, that's good. Now, tell me, Kendall, what would you say that really impressed you about the whole thing?
Oh, just the magnitude of what takes place in a storm like that. Just the planning and the huge amount of resources it takes to take care of that big of an event.
And you really can't even call it an event, a tragedy, really.
That's right.
You know, a real tragedy. Had you ever seen that much water before?
Well, by the time we got there, there wasn't just a lot of flooding. We didn't see a lot. Plus, we were working nights, so everywhere we drove was in the dark. So we couldn't really tell a lot of damage. And when we weren't on missions and working, they wouldn't let us out of the compound. They made us stay right there, and so we weren't free to just go drive around and look at stuff.
And was it really well organized?
I would say it was. There was some minor flaws here and there that could have been better, but I mean, you're going to have flaws with that big of a tragedy. And I think all in all, they handled it very well.
Well, that's good to know. And now tell me, in your own words, if you were going to say to someone who maybe would be in a mission, well, should they go or shouldn't they?
Absolutely. If there's any way that you can go to help these people, absolutely. Take the opportunity and go. You'll be well blessed for it.
So you really got a blessing.
Oh, yes. Yes.
You did too, Kendall?
I sure did.
Anything else you'd like to tell us?
No, I think we just need to remember them in our prayers and remember those people down there as they recover.
Yes. It'll take a long, long time. We've been talking with 2 of Bailey County's finest, EMS, and they work here in Muleshoe, in the Muleshoe area, for you and for us to keep us safe.